Hey everyone! We're right in the middle of a series called Your New Playlist. It's about understanding how your faith plays into the power of mindset. Today, we're focusing on choosing wisdom when it comes to your thoughts. As we get started today, make sure you're sitting with your small group. As we go, we'll be talking through some questions as a group, and I'm really excited to hear about your conversations. But first, I want to share with you my biggest fear as a kid. It's a really silly fear, and I totally know it's silly now. As a kid, I'm from the Midwest, and my family would travel to the beach probably about once a year. One time we were there, and as we were hanging out on the beach, this giant crab shows up on the shore. It's called a horseshoe crab if you don't know what a horseshoe crab is. Anyways, it looks prehistoric because it is, and it has all these spikes and this weird tail, and it's just kind of creepy looking. I was boogie boarding in the water with my friends, and when that happened, I accidentally stepped on the crab. Now, the crab is totally fine, we did find that out, but I was not. I was terrified, and from that, I had not swam in the ocean probably for like another 10 years because of that one horseshoe crab. So anytime I went to an aquarium and there was a horseshoe crab, I would freak out, or anytime I went to the beach, I refused to swim in the water because of that one encounter. Enough about me, now it's your turn. Huddle up with your group and talk about this for a few minutes. What was your biggest fear when you were a kid? We all know what it's like to be afraid of something, right? But have you ever wondered if there was a way to get over your fears? To remove fear from your life forever? Can any of us become so consistently brave that we never experience fear again? Can we actually be fearless? Unfortunately, I'm not so sure that fear is something we can ever get rid of. Sure, your fears are probably not the same now as they were when you were a kid. You may not be scared of clowns or bugs anymore, but that doesn't mean fear is gone altogether. For most of us, those old fears that are now funny to us get replaced with new, bigger fears as we grow up. Now that you're in high school, your fears come in a different form, like worrying about a specific class, or a parent who lost their job, or making the team at school. In fact, take a second and talk about it. What's one fear that you have? So many people pretend to be fearless. They try to walk through life like fear isn't real. And if it is real, they act like it's not a big deal. While we might be really good at pretending to be fearless at times, the reality is none of us can actually escape fear. And the more we try, the harder it gets to escape it. You can ignore it for a while or try to downplay it as nothing, and even attempt to push through it. But eventually, fear shows back up. And just like that, it's all you think about, all you hear, and all you feel. Fear has a way of changing the playlist in our minds, doesn't it? When we let fear take over our thoughts, it leads us down a path of endless questions of what if? What if I don't make friends? Or what if my parents get divorced? What if I fail the test? What if they don't get better? What if the world doesn't get better? This one is tricky because sometimes fear can actually be helpful. Sometimes those questions of what if help us avoid or be cautious around things that could hurt us. That's not a bad thing at all. In fact, let's talk about this. What's one way fear can be helpful? The problem comes when we let fear take over, when it becomes the boss of our actions and our thoughts and our lives, when it holds us back from trying new things or discovering good things. That's when we need to figure out how to turn down the volume on fear. That's when we need a new playlist. One of the best things about the Bible is that it gives us examples of real people who had real experiences and real feelings, just like us. Some of Jesus's closest followers actually had an encounter with him that taught them a lot about how to deal with fear. I think it can do the same for us now. While on earth, Jesus spent most of his time with a group of 12 close friends. Because they spent so much time with Jesus, they saw him do some pretty amazing things, like heal sick people and forgive sins, do miracles, all this really cool stuff. You'd think since these guys were Jesus's closest friends, they'd have nothing to fear, right? After all, they're hanging out with the guy who had the power to literally do anything. What could they possibly be afraid of with Jesus by their side? One night, they were all traveling in a boat with Jesus when a huge storm rolled in. The waves were so high, they were literally sweeping over the boat. In the middle of the storm on a tiny boat, these guys did exactly what I think I would have done. They looked for Jesus. The guy they knew could literally do anything would definitely help calm their fears, right? Well, here's what happened. Suddenly, a furious storm came up on the lake so that the waves swept over the boat, but Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him saying, "Lord, save us, we're going to drown." What was Jesus doing? Taking a nap. Obviously, the disciples were afraid. They were in the middle of the water riding out a major storm, and the one person who could stop it was resting his eyes while the waves were crashing all around them. When they finally got Jesus up and awake, they probably thought he was going to save them. Spoiler alert, he did. But first, he had something to say. Take a look. He replied, "You of little faith, why are you so afraid?" Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. The men were amazed and asked, "What kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him." Now, while I can't be sure because obviously I wasn't there, I don't think Jesus said the disciples had little faith because he was mad. I don't think he was trying to make them feel bad for not having enough faith that they'd be safe. I think he was trying to show them that even when they're afraid, their faith in the one who is bigger than anything they might fear is stronger, louder, and there to help them face their fears. Some scholars even say that the phrase "ye of little faith" is actually translated more like a term of endearment. It's like he knew that they were human. Yes, Jesus calmed the storm, and not only the one raging on the waters. Jesus calmed the storm in his followers. He calmed their fears, not just by stopping the wind and the waves, but by showing them this: fear is loud, but it is a liar. Jesus is bigger than what we're afraid of. How does it make you feel to know that Jesus is bigger than your fears? Did these disciples have a reason to be afraid? Well, yeah, they were on the water in a boat in the middle of a huge storm. That's scary. But Jesus wanted them to know that their fear didn't have to be the only thing they felt. It didn't have to be the only voice they listened to in the water. It didn't have to be the only song in their playlist. His voice and his presence could play louder. Fear is loud, but it is a liar. With Jesus, we can turn the volume down on fear. While we may not be facing a storm at sea, we've all experienced fear. We've all felt afraid, alone, and out of control, just like the disciples did in that boat. But in the same way Jesus was with them, he's with us. So we can trust him in the middle of a storm. We can turn to his presence and power when we're afraid. Will we still have reasons to be afraid in life? Yeah, that's just a part of life. I'm not saying following Jesus means you'll never fear again, but I am saying that he can help you walk through your fear. He can help you turn down the volume on fear. Hang on one second, let me show you what I mean. We all want life to work like a light switch, but instead it works more like a fan. You all know how light switches turn things on and off. This is what we all want when we're afraid, a magical switch that makes it all go away. But like we said earlier, sometimes fear can be helpful. It can keep us alert and safe. We don't want to flip a switch and never feel fear. Instead, we've got to think of fear like a dial. A dial doesn't always turn things off, but it does turn things down. When we turn the dial down on fear, we're not shutting it out completely. We're simply not giving it the loudest voice. Difficult things will show up. Yes, things will happen that are scary, and yes, fear creeps in and hangs out. You might not be able to turn it off, but when fear takes over your thoughts like an annoying song stuck on repeat, you can dial it down. Talk about this with your group. What's one step you can take to turn the volume down on fear? I hope you had a great conversation talking about one step you can take to turn the volume down on fear. One way to do this is by focusing on what's true. Instead of letting your mind wander into a million what ifs, you can focus on what is. You can focus on the truth we find in Scripture that reminds us of the God who is with us and for us in the face of every fear. Take this psalm for example. "Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. Your rod and your staff protect and comfort me." Focus on that for a second. When we walk through dark times, we don't have to be afraid because God is with us. I don't know about you, but if I find myself in the middle of a life storm in dark waters, this is a truth I want to remember. My challenge to you this week is to memorize this verse. Let it be the place you start when it comes to facing fear. Fear is loud, but it is a liar. Maybe you need a little help talking about or even identifying what it is that you're afraid of. Maybe the volume on your fear is really loud and you need someone to encourage you to trust Jesus in the middle of it. That's totally okay. You can talk to a trusted adult, a parent, or one of your friend's parents, or your small group leader. They will help you walk through the circumstances or situations that might be causing you to fear. They're here to remind you that even if your circumstances don't change, you can walk through them with confidence and faith in Jesus, because Jesus is in control of it all.